Hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle the things in football and soccer that we thought were interesting. Nailed it! I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is top MLS broadcaster, Sirius XM FC broadcaster, the face in many ways of the US men's national team. That face, of course, suggests failure. It is Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hi buddy, you all right?
Yeah, I love our get-togethers every week. I love our banter back and forth, my man. I'm doing great, yes. T.O. Max and I had LAFC against Vancouver on Friday night. Matty Bogusz, 20th goal in all competition. They're through to the next round, where they will figure out a way to, bypass the Seattle Sounders team that's going to cause its own set of circumstances and troubles. But the big news, Inter Miami is out. They end up losing to Atlanta United. And Rob Valentino as the interim head coach, $54 million sold in the summer transfer window. Carlos Bocanegra pushed out the door. Who's coming in? Who's staying? What's happening? Big old polar bear Brad Guzan standing on his head. Even shouts for him to go back to the U.S. men's national team based on the run of form that he's in right now. And maybe most importantly, the legend of Dax McCarty continues as the MLS veteran announcing his retirement at the end of the season. This is now like the fifth game where he's like, last game, got to make the most out of this, and continues on. So T.O. Max and I will have Orlando City against Atlanta United on the backside of the international window in the Eastern Conference semifinals. But Inter Miami out. Columbus Crew is out. FC Cincinnati is out. It's been some big surprises so far. What's next in the world of MLS Cup playoffs?
Anybody's ball game, as I think you guys say over there, something like that. I do want to ask you some further questions on what's happening in MLS and the Inter Miami of it all. Plus, you know, the fact it was an excellent 3-game series between them and Atlanta United, and yet the whole concept is the favorite goes through, and they haven't, so that was great. From a football perspective, it's been fantastic. Won't somebody please think of the sponsors? I want to talk to you about that. I also want to talk about Man City's losing run. I want to talk to you a bit about this David Coote story, which is bubbling as we are recording the program. If someone invites you back to their house for a drink after the pub, that's absolutely fine. But if they get their phone out, you are being striped up, my friend. And you get them to put their phones away immediately, okay? Yeah. That's advice for life. And we'll do some heroes and villains too as well. Let's start with what's happening out in the USA, because I find it fascinating. You're covering it in great detail, Dunny. Of course, you're going to games, you're working on games, you're very much involved in it. I always think when it comes to MLS, there's a really interesting conversation about, is it too European? Is it too American? What is the... I like the Americana of the 3-game series of the last couple of years. I enjoyed it last year, but this year has been really good because we've been getting some brilliant ties. And the fact Atlanta squeaked in on the last day to even qualify for this.
2-1 win at Orlando. Yeah.
Incredible, to get there. To then do this 3-game series where the second game, they get all sorts of decisions go against them. They then get through to the third game on that last-minute goal. You get this last game. You got Needle. You got Brad Guzan being pushed into the net like a teenager getting bullied at high school kind of thing. You got a perfectly well-executed game plan from Atlanta in Miami. All of this. Give us your view on Miami being out, because from a football fan perspective, I don't care really who goes through. The mess of it all maybe has subconsciously drawn me into watching the Miami game.
Yeah.
But also I'd watch it because I work here and I work with you, so I probably would watch some of it anyway. From a football fan perspective, I just think it was one of the best series you could have possibly got. Is everyone happy with that, or is there a general sense of missed opportunity here?
Well, I think the missed opportunity is that the eyeballs surrounding Lionel Messi playing in Major League Soccer and specific to Inter Miami is massive. The numbers, while we don't have, the hard numbers per se, you can tell that every time Lionel Messi and Inter Miami are playing, fans from around the world who have Apple TV and have their Apple TV subscription are most certainly watching these games. Now, how do you deconstruct what just happened? Well, Inter Miami Supporter Shield winners, most points in the history of Major League Soccer, 74 points over a regular season schedule. Gianni Infantino, decision day, they win that game. He announces at the FIFA Club World Cup, head of the Balds, they will be opening Inter Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. Because, why not? But here's the difference. Atlanta United only had 40 points in the regular season. Again, Gonzalo Pineda fired in June. In the summer, Thiago Almeida, Yakamaki sold, $54 million incoming. They let Carlos Bocanegra, former U.S. international and technical director, go. Garth Lagerwey, who was formerly at Real Salt Lake up here and in Seattle, went to Atlanta United to kind of be the team president, be the CEO, kind of run the entire infrastructure, but then decided, you know what, this isn't going right. I'm going to put my hands into this mix. Asked Rob Valentino to be the interim head coach. Second time he's been the interim head coach. By the way, he was an assistant when Tata Martino was there. So he's been around this group for a long, long time. Decision day 2-1 win. They eke into the playoffs. There could have been 4, I think 5 teams on the very last day could have ended up in that 9th position. They go up, and this is Saturday. Tuesday, they play in Montreal. They're up 2-1 in the dying moments. Joseph Martinez gets a penalty for Montreal. They go to PKs, and they end up winning. That's Tuesday night. Friday night, they got to go down to Fort Lauderdale and play Miami. They end up losing 2-1. They didn't play poorly, but then they get that full week's break. They go to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and this is one of those weird matchups, a weird matchup because Inter Miami is so dominant, but there was just something about those transition moments where Atlanta was capable of doing some really interesting things. They'd drawn at Mercedes-Benz Stadium earlier during the regular season. They get the game-winning goal late in the match, sets up game 3. You've got Rojas scores. Thierry scores 2 goals in 2 minutes just after the opening goal. That's been incredible. Then Messi scores his brilliant goal in the 65th. And then transition moment, cross to the back post, Schleich in behind. He gets the game winner. 15 minutes still remaining. Just 2 big old bucks locking horns. And Brad Guzan stood on his head. And in those moments of, are you proactive? Are you reactive? Can you win or can you lose? It swung back heavily in favor of Atlanta United. So 34-point gap in between the regular season results. Inter Miami on 74, Atlanta United on 40. They go through to the next round. We thought it was going to be Inter Miami playing host to Orlando City. Now it's Orlando City playing host to Atlanta United. Columbus is out. Cincinnati is out. Real Salt Lake is out on the West Coast. So there's been some massive upsets. And as much as Jordi Alba wants to talk about the format not being completely fair, the reality is everybody knew what the format is. And it's all about momentum, and it's about figuring out how to win games. And by the way, talking about Real Salt Lake, they didn't lose a game in regular time in their last 8 matches. They drew both home and away against Minnesota and lost in playoffs. Their last 3 seasons, they've lost in penalties and been knocked out. So there's something to say of the difference between winning your games, losing your games, and understanding the format of going straight to penalties. Very similar to what we saw at Leagues Cup. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's those small little gray margins that are the difference between moving on. And again, I don't think anybody could have ever predicted Columbus, Cincinnati, and Inter Miami, top 3 teams in the Western or Eastern Conference, are out in round 1. Incredible.
Do you think that going forward, because we know MLS tweaks and they make changes, and one year it's 1 game, then it's 3 games, whatever it is, do you think that there will be a meeting now with the big wigs and the sponsors, and they're like, we can't do a 3-game series again because we lost all these teams? Like, do you think we'll see this change?
Well,
and should it as well?
So let me roll this back before I answer. To be clear, one of the reasons why this format exists is that we have the idea of the single table right around the world. Well, because you have Eastern and Western Conference, if you make the playoffs, effectively as an owner, you have earned a playoff home game. And the idea is that you are rewarding your fan base by making the playoffs. This is that little carrot on top, is that you get to play at home. And then the ownership gets the money because they're hosting a playoff game, right? So $1 million-ish bucks into the organization for making the playoffs at a bare minimum. Outside of the wild card game, which is 8 and 9, play that that 8th posts, and you go in. I respect the format. I understand the format. To your point, MLS has always been incredibly nimble because what they're realizing is with the influx of ownership and new money that's being invested, it's no longer the millionaires club, it's the billionaires club. And I think people are kind of losing this conversation in real time in that you're seeing owners coming in and owners investing that are multi-billionaires, and they have ownership in NHL. They have ownership in NBA. They have ownership in Major League Baseball. They actually have ownership in multiple clubs. They're creating kind of these umbrellas of clubs. Jorge Mas, David Blitzer. There's a lot of these owners that have multiple clubs around the world. So right now, what's happening is as they're having these leadership councils and meetings and ownership group meetings, they're saying, okay, by the way, my club in Portugal, this works well. Hey, by the way, in NHL, this is what we do. Hey, by the way, for the NBA, this is something that might be worthy or valuable in kind of this hierarchy of MLS. So I'm just reminding people that there's really intelligent, smart financial decisions that are being made behind the scenes that do impact different formats. But I do like this format because there is jeopardy involved. And what happens is the momentum, and a perfect example going the opposite way is Colorado Rapids. They lost 8 of their last 8 games. So at one point during the playoffs in August, close to that, they were in touching distance of second. Just a rock sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Terrible results. They're out. Atlanta, whoop, on the way up. Minnesota, Eric Ramsey, whoop, on the way up. So there's a unique dynamic of consistency versus momentum swings. And unfortunately, some of the teams that we felt had the momentum on their favor, they end up just bucking the trend and punching these teams that we thought, without a shadow of a doubt, were the teams that were going to challenge for an MLS Cup final.
I think what's really interesting about that answer, and I think what's going to be interesting about seeing this move forward, is that you're a football man and you're a sportsman, and you explain it in ways, even appreciating the business side of it, that still has an element of, but I love the competition, I love the
Yeah.
jeopardy. You know, don't love that? Billionaires. They do not love the jeopardy of it. They do not love the prospect that their golden goose is not about to lay that egg. And I just wonder whether, you know, not in the particular, in like the next cycle, but maybe the one after that. I don't know how long Lionel Messi is going to go for. Probably years, I imagine. I mean, they'll try and keep him propped up for as long as they can, 3 to 5 years even. I think it's another year on the contract, but it's going to go for longer, I think.
Yeah.
Where's he going to go? But I do sort of feel like there'll be a conversation going. I mean, Tim Cook, who runs Apple, literally is tweeting about the fact, oh, I can't wait to watch Lionel Messi in the MLS, blah, blah, blah. He ain't doing that about Galaxy, Minnesota. It'd be great if he did, and I hope he does. He might
be
now, but you know, there is a drawing people in and knowing you can like make some money from these people. And I just wonder whether they go, why we got Jeopardy? You know, we can have the Jeopardy in 2 years' time. Now we don't want Jeopardy. We want Messi. I don't know.
And by the way, that's a perfect point, by the way, a perfect tie-in to the idea of promotion relegation.
Yeah.
And when you're asking these gajillionaires to say, hey, by the way, if you have a terrible season, you're getting relegated. Like, wait, what? Oh yeah, and by the way,
risk in the portfolio.
Yeah. Didn't see that one coming. But you know, that idea is same, you know, for some of the investment, the incredible amount of strategic investment we're seeing from US companies with regards to championship and Premier League and all of that influx. So you know, we'll see. And perfect example could be the Freakins, not investing in Major League Soccer, but owning Roma, looking to own, you know, Everton. The business models are different for different people, and who wants to be involved. We'll see. But I think right now,
start taxing the rich? Let's start taxing the rich, shall we? Trickle down economics doesn't work. These people are too rich. No one should own multiple clubs, be it conglomerate or individual. Let's start taxing these people. Yeah, and then we can make ticket prices either A, affordable because we have more money, or maybe like cheaper. In general, I don't know.
What about the churches?
Don't get me started, mate.
See, little wind up there. That's our relationship for the people that are watching us.
Don't get me started because I want people to listen to this program. And most of my views are not fit for broadcast. They're not fit for broadcast. So we've got a little breakdown for internationals. Then we're at the quarterfinals. We've got a Hudson River Derby. We've got LAFC Sounders. We mentioned Orlando now hosting Atlanta, and Galaxy who probably look the best team in it against Minnesota. Give us a quick preview, little break. But who's your money on?
Well, I'd say that Minnesota is going to provide a really interesting test for Greg Vanney and LA Galaxy, because obviously the 3 Ps of Painesville, Ricky Pooch, and Gabriel Peck and Joveljic up top, they're incredibly dynamic. But the way that Eric Ramsey's set his team up with Bongi on one side, Rosales opposite, Robin Lod operating underneath, Kelvin Yeboah, they are a transition team that knows how to break down opponents. And historically this season, that's where LA Galaxy has been at their most vulnerable. LAFC Seattle, I don't know, man. Like, it's all about depending about who's going to be healthy. And if Jordan Morris is injured and not available, and you're putting Raul Ruidiaz up top, that's a big loss for the way that, you know, the connectivity between Albert Rusnak and what we've seen from Jordan Morris this year. Could be a goalkeeping clinic from Hugo Lloris and Stefan Fry. Hudson River Derby, two teams that go about their style of play differently. You've got the Red Bull press that caused so much havoc and so influential in the final third versus an NYCFC team right now. Whether you're talking about Maxi, or you're talking about Rodriguez, or you're talking about Hans Wolf, they can cause some problems in their own right. And this Orlando City Atlanta game, I'm not sure. When you think about having Luis Muriel, Duncan McGuire, and Nico Ladero available off the bench for Orlando City, those are three big players that can impact the game. They're tough in the midfield. Schlegel is kind of the master of the dark arts in his partnership with Robin Janssen. And then ultimately El Pupo, Pedro Galese, rolling back time with his penalty kick performance the other night. As I say that, why wouldn't you think that Atlanta United has all the momentum in their favor? You talk about these David versus Goliath type wins. I mean, that upset is going to be termed MLS Cup set potentially of the century, considering what they've done. So I wouldn't want to bet against them. The betting man says that, the MLS Cup final is going to be in LA. I think the odds would say it's LAFC playing host to LA Galaxy in the conference final. But again, I struggle to remember a data point in which I've seen these type of upsets so far, and nothing is there to suggest that these upsets don't continue in 2 weeks' time as we get back to action in the semifinals of the playoffs.
Listen, I want to get to some other stories and heroes and villains as well. And yes, I could have done an hour on how much I'm annoyed with Julen Lopetegui, and I can't believe I didn't see a photograph of a corner flag this morning, but we are where we are. Before we get to that, though, some light housekeeping. If you're watching the program on YouTube, hi, that's what I look like. Handsome, right? What do you mean, no? Off. Sorry, Tim. But if you're watching the program on YouTube, you can also listen to the program as a podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening as a podcast, you can watch us do this in your home on YouTube for free, pretty much.
Spotify as well. Spotify, if you listen on Spotify, just slide it over and you can watch us on video. Yeah.
And wherever you are enjoying this podcast, do leave us a 5-star review. We want 5-star reviews. And we also want, if you've enjoyed it, tell a friend. That's the best way. It's like canvassing. Tell one friend how much you enjoyed the podcast. And also, you can go back on YouTube 2 episodes to watch Brian Dunseth. He did his own hot sauce bet with himself. Tim and I, who produces the show, did not in any way sign up for this. He took some of the hot sauce on a wing, and we were like, oh, okay, fine. And then a couple of minutes later, Timmy Toughnuts took another bit. And then the rest of the program, we thought, do we need to stop this? He might be dying. Do we need to call a medical professional? Does he have insurance? So you can go back and watch that again. Anyway, there's your housekeeping. Right. A breaking news story. I want to cover this, Dunny, because I want to get your view on this, because I'm always finding myself in a position where I'm defending referees. Even though, I'm as critical of them as sort of anyone, I just have a real problem with anyone who says it's conspiracy. We're in a conspiracy theory world where the idiots get too much attention on their ridiculous and unsourced and unverified views, right? I find it very frustrating part of our world. That's why I'm trying to come off the Elon Musk website, but the rest of them I try are all crap. And that is crap, but it's still the best thing, even though it's crap compared to what it used to be. Anyway, David Coote is a Premier League referee, and he's been suspended after a video allegedly showing him making derogatory comments about Liverpool as a football club, and their then manager, Jurgen Klopp, could have been former manager, I don't know when the video was taken, circulated on social media. It's currently a live, ongoing investigation, and at this moment in time, we don't know when it was or anything like that. We'll get further details. It looks like he is super pissed. And by that, I'm going to say drunk, and we'll just take it as that. But it looks like, to me, having experienced similar things, he's gone back to somebody's house and he's had a few drinks. I don't know if it's friends or strangers he's met at the pub, who knows? And for some reason, he is talking on camera. He had a couple of things to say about Liverpool, a couple of things to say about Jurgen Klopp, that in themselves, having watched both these videos that I've seen, he isn't admitting to conspiracy or to making bad decisions against Liverpool because he hates them. He's not saying that. However, it doesn't look good. And he is the referee. Again, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but he's the referee. You'll recall last year, Martin Odegaard handles in the penalty area. It's Anfield, Liverpool, Arsenal, and that penalty is not given. We could all find ones, right? We could find ones from this weekend. Like
2 weeks ago, he was even, what was it, with Malik Tillman and the throw-in when VAR and his foot was completely on the field. Like there's his name has been referenced quite often recently, him and Michael Oliver. So, I mean, this is a big data point. To your point about the video, the only thing I haven't seen any clarification is how old is this video?
Yes.
Right? Is it recent? Is it older? Kind of the data points that he's talking to suggests that maybe it was in real time when Jurgen Klopp was the manager of Liverpool. Here's the only thing I'll say. What he is saying is nothing that I wouldn't expect from a perspective of a referee, meaning that the instances of the engagement between the managers or the referees or the managers or the players and the referees, that we often forget that these guys are human beings, right? That they are going to take away certain perspectives from, getting MF to your face or getting told that you're a cheater and that you're a liar and all that, and be like, "F off, I'm a fucking cheater or a liar. Sorry, Tim. Like, but in moments like this, when the camera's twisting and turning and he knows he's on camera and he's saying these things, number one, that's just stupid. But number two, I'm just trying to figure out exactly why he would feel that was a comfortable enough environment for him to share his perspective and his feelings about what had happened. Because the reality is, Rennie, whether we like it or not, we expect these referees to take the high road in every single situation.
Yeah.
It's really every conversation or every question to a referee, it's by the book. Here's the laws of the game. Here's how it's handled. This is what we expect and all these things. But now, because we expect them to be kind of the moral compass and the arbitrator of what we think is fair over the course of 90 minutes, now this peels back the onion, it opens up the curtain, and this certainly allows the referees to be judged in a manner in which now they are considered biased. And that's going to be the problem going forward, because we know that there's certain games that certain referees won't be involved in based on their public proclamation of who they are fans of and the perception that they could be biased towards a certain team because they support the opposite team in some type of derby, some type of rivalry. So yeah, this is going to be a cleanup job. Howard Webb is going to have to grab the mop in the bucket and figure out the right way to clean this up, because it isn't going to be dependent upon whatever the suspension and or subsequent firing this looks like from David Coote. This is going to be more of, there's a PR issue now, and Howard Webb is going to have to sit up there on the dais, with Michael, and have to justify why this is a one-time incident, as opposed to what we all know is when these guys get together. Oh, who do you hate? Who do you hate? Remember when this happened? Remember that happened.
It's a place of work.
They do it all the time. Yeah.
Of course they do. Everyone does it, right? Even like, maybe not to this particular degree. I don't know where everyone works who's listening, but you chop it up with people and you slag someone off because they annoyed you that day. It's not personal. I'm sure everyone has done it about me. And that's the way it goes. That's offices and places of work. And my issue here isn't necessarily that. I don't think he says anything particularly too offensive, like in terms of his professionalism. He says bad words, but I think there's a way to smooth your way out of that. And your point is absolutely right. If fucking Jurgen Klopp, sorry, Tim, was like publicly, as he did for a long time, abusing referees verbally, I think it's fair to say that I got home to the wife and I'd be like, that Jurgen Klopp was a to me today. Like, sorry, Tim. Why wouldn't you do that? But it's the whole camera in the face bit, and he looks completely pissed. Like that's the other element. You question someone's judgment on that score.
Well,
anyway.
and at the very end, he said, please don't use this. And it's like, well,
what am I going to use it for? Watch it in my own time?
No.
Every time I go for a I'm going to watch this video, am I? Sorry, Tim. Like, what's it for? Obviously, once you're, it's one for the kids, this. Once you're on camera, you're on camera. That is it. This is why millennials are the best generation, because when we started going out, right, there were no cameras. And so we know when to put the fucking cameras down. Sorry, Tim. everyone before that, it's such a novelty to them. They've got the cameras out all the time, holding them like opening the leather front of their phones, like
Yeah.
old. Sorry, Tim. Does that count? I don't know. Whereas the younger ones, like everyone who's like 5 or 6 years younger than me, they've always got their phones out. They're
Yeah.
always filming. They're always live. They're always streaming. No, when you get to a party, put your phone into a box or like put it in your pocket or turn it off or put it on just calls only in case there's an
Yeah.
emergency and have a nice time. Be a bit loose. Say things that, maybe not get you fired, but might make you some enemies or whatever because if you don't yuck it up somewhere,
Well,
you end up being a coot.
yeah. It's a verb. It's an adverb. It's an adjective.
Gonna
Hey,
run with it.
by the way, remember this right here. That's a press conference.
Yeah.
The reality, the moment that you tweet anything, the moment that you put anything out, that's a press conference. You are live. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a scary thought, man.
Yeah.
I'm unfortunately, I fear for my kids having to live this world.
Well,
No
did you see
way.
in Australia they have made it illegal for kids under 16 to have social media? Did you see that recently? I'm not sure if it's gone through, but it's being proposed in the Australian
Exactly.
Parliament. It's a good idea. I
Yeah.
like it. I didn't have social media till I was 19. Didn't screw me up. Anyway, let's get to some other football things. Man City lost against Brighton and Hove Albion by 2-1. It's 4 defeats in a row, all competitions, only 2 in the league, so it's not like Liverpool's for the taking as yet.
Yeah.
Guardiola losing 4 games in a row in all competitions for the first time in his managerial career. Last time City did it, Stuart Pearce was in charge back in 2006. I think that was the year where they scored like 10 goals at home or something. And it was like awful for Man City. And of course, they got bought by a country after that and things turned around. There was no way of knowing. What do you make to Man City right now? Is it just Rodri or is it something else?
I think there's a mixture of things happening. We talked about the potential for burnout. We talked about the physical side of burnout with the injuries. We talked about the mental side of the consistency at such an incredible high level. At the end of the day, even if it is Pep Guardiola, at sometimes the messaging and the manipulation of motivation can become an issue. Let's also acknowledge that this game in particular, he had Nathan Ake and Akanji on the bench and still chose to go with some of the younger players, which could
Yeah.
play dividend going forward. Erling Haaland gets his goal. I believe that's like his first loss in a game in which he scored a
Yeah.
goal. It
Yeah.
was like 40 wins and 6 draws, some crazy number. But they had chances, they had chances to win. And I'll tell you what, man, Ipswich Town, Kieran McKenna, they're a funky little team, man. The momentum that they had last year in the games in which they won championship and really, really impressive. We saw Burnley do the same thing the year before. But this year they've dropped points when I thought they could have won, and they've dropped points when I thought they could have drawn. And so this is, this is one of those moments where for Man City, you're constantly talking about what the continued level of expectation is. You're also talking about a Brighton team that's beat virtually everybody outside of the loss against Chelsea, that 4-2 loss, which I believe a couple weeks ago I said that could be one of those moments where you learn what you're capable of doing, learn what you need to be better at, and then ultimately put that all together. So
Yeah.
Hurstler and company have been really, really impressive.
So good.
So
Don't hire a useless over the hill manager. Maybe hire somebody like young with new ideas. There's an idea. Give
yeah,
it a whirl.
or maybe the path less traveled for an Arnie Slot.
Yeah.
What he's done as opposed to the brightest, shiniest object that's available. So, never happened at Barcelona, never happened at Bayern Munich, has never happened. I think it happened back in like 2016 for City. They got to get it back on track. But I was, I do this thing where I tell you I write down all the upcoming games for the schedule. So I did my upcoming games on the backside of the international window. City have Spurs at home, Feyenoord at home,
Win.
at Liverpool, Forest at home,
Ugh.
at Palace,
Oof.
at Juve, home against United, away at Aston Villa. That
Ooh,
is
it's not
what their
easy.
first 8 games upon the return of the international break.
Not easy.
So they've got to get it back on track sooner rather than later.
My only theory on Man City, and we'll see how this plays out in the fullness of time, but Pep Guardiola potentially leaving in the summer, and it just sort of feels like they're going to go in the summer. Or he's going to go in the summer. It just feels like it's come to the end of its road, and maybe he signs like 1-year extension, but it seems like it feels like there's a bigger job on at Manchester City. It feels like they're now ready for a big, big rebuild. And
Mm.
by that, I mean, it's not they haven't got really good young players. They've got really good young players. Foden is young. Haaland is young. Gvardiol is young. Lewis is young. I get that. But this team wasn't built on that group. This team was built on Kevin De Bruyne, who, I've said to you loads of times, I just, it's a gift that I've been able to see him in the flesh as many times as I've been able to. In cup finals and big league games at his absolute peak. I don't think I've ever seen a better footballer. It would take someone, peak Messi levels. I never saw Messi at his absolute peak in person for me to consider that person to be better than what I saw with Kevin De Bruyne. That guy is gone. Not to say he's not still amazing, but he's
Yeah.
not fit enough. He can't play enough. And of course, he isn't the player he was 2 or 3 years ago. Kyle Walker was the guy that used to pocket Mbappe and Vinny Jr.
He
In this
looks
game,
dead.
got bullied by Kaoru Mitoma. And again, I'm not criticizing Mitoma, who's good, but he's not Mbappe and Vinny Jr. And you'd be
Yeah.
confident in Kyle Walker could take him. And now I don't know if I would feel as confident. John Stones, as derided as maybe he could have been by some, has been so important to Manchester City in that hybrid role when they won the Champions League, but for a decade, basically, as their lead centre-half next to a cavalcade of odd people from Di Michaelis through to Ruben Dias and everyone in between, Mangala or whatever. It's been Stones and someone.
Gosh, I forgot
So
about Mangala.
there's all these guys who are just coming towards the end, and maybe Foden will step up and be the new De Bruyne. Ilkay Gundogan is fantastic. He came on in the West Ham game that I was at earlier in the season, changed the game.
Yeah.
But he's good for 25 minutes. They let him go at the right time. But when he comes back as a really important 25-minute player, not starting away at Brighton, who could outrun anybody. So it just feels like we're at that big Alex Ferguson sells Yap Stam moment. Alex Ferguson says goodbye to David Beckham moment.
Yeah.
And he could do that because he knew he was going to stay. If Guardiola is going, and the vibe is, if it's not this summer, it'll be next summer, there is such a big build to come. I just wonder how much that's playing into this whole narrative. I kind of hope so, because that makes this year interesting. And we need it to be interesting.
Well, and just to finish that point, we still don't know with the 115 charges, what the fallout of that is going to look like. So, yeah, I guess I never thought heading into the November international window that this is what we'd be talking about with regards to Man City. But I guess again, it just shows you maybe we need to be talking more about how close all of this is. What is it? 4th position to 13th position, just 4 points separating. Or sorry, 3rd position to 14th.
Yeah.
There's just 4 points separating it. So very, very quickly, this table can be upended by the time we're having this conversation at the new year.
The only other topic I wanted to talk about today before we do heroes and villains is Tottenham Hotspur, because they're so fascinating to me.
Who are
such
they?
an interesting story. Who are they? They're 10th in the table currently, which is under what you would have expected. And I just wanted to read you this, because if people ever say to you, what do you mean by Spursy? What does that actually mean? Well, here's a little run of results for you that is absolutely bizarre. So 4-2 thrashing of West Ham, 1-0 win against AZ Alkmaar in the Europa League. A loss away at Crystal Palace, who at that point hadn't won a single game all season. A victory against Manchester City to knock them out of the Carabao Cup, followed by a 4-1 win against Aston Villa, who are, at that point, top of the Champions League table and a pretty good team. They then go to Galatasaray and get beaten by 3-2. They then lose at home to Ipswich. They have given 2 teams their first Premier League win of the season in a same run, where they've beaten Villa, West Ham, who for them it's a big game, it's a big rivalry, and Man City in the cup. What? How is that possible, Dunny? How can you be that inconsistent?
I literally, so we do our 3 up, 3 down on Monday mornings over on Counterattack on Sirius XM, and they were my down, because I just wrote, I don't know what Tottenham Hotspur are right now. I think that they're a team that effectively just matches the level of the opponent. When they're playing the big dogs, they're playing with the big dogs. And then these other games in these last, 7, 8 matches, they're playing to the level of the opponent where it's this low. And side note, for Maddison, I don't know if he's dart throwing Maddison or he's like pouty, frustrated Maddison sitting there, throwing his toys out the pram because he's either being subbed off or he's not starting matches. Big Ange Postecoglou said, mate, I know the problem. At the, what, March, April
Mm,
version last year, it doesn't seem like the problem's been solved.
no.
And I know now we'll get back into this conversation about it's not Big Ange. Who is it above him? He's tight with the purse strings. He's not spending money, all of this stuff. But the reality is, this group of players should be performing at a higher consistency, in which puts them within touching distance of a top four spot. Now, again, because I think so many other teams are so close to one another, there's still plenty of time to recover. But for Spurs, talk about my handy dandy notebook, at Man City, home against Roma, Fulham at home, at Bournemouth, then Chelsea, then away at
Oof.
Glasgow Rangers, at Southampton. You got Man United at home in the EFL Cup, Liverpool at home, and then you do away against Forest, home against Wolves, and Newcastle. And that gets you to the start of the new year.
Not great.
Are they a European team or are they a mid-table team? I don't know based on these last 8 games or so, because when they're on, they are on. But my God, one more time, if I have to hear Timo Werner in behind, up over the crossbar or just wide, yeah, wild.
Yeah, I mean, the only other element for me, I don't want to labor this point too much. I did it earlier today on the football show, but like he is just so obnoxious, and I find that to be like when this turns at Spurs, it's going to turn real hard. I'm just bookmarking it for you now because he has not made friends, and like when he's not talking about Tottenham or doing his like Tottenham job. You know, when he did his media bits in the summer for the World Cup, likable, affable, interesting, all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, when he does his Tottenham stuff, a real like petulant, obnoxious, bitter individual. And I know I go on about this, and you know it's a personal pet peeve. It's not for everybody, but you know you'll appreciate Danny because you do it for a living. The power imbalance of the post-match interview, the power
Yeah,
imbalance of the reporter to manager relationship,
we've seen it a few times with them. Yeah.
it's vast. And I have some sympathy because they've got to do interview after interview and you've just been humiliated and you're getting coated off by 60,000 people. I get it. But also, be a professional. Like, this is the very top level. This is the top level of club football. And he's standing there staring at his shoes, being very confrontational to reporters who can't say, oh, mate, chin up, look at me, answer the fucking question. Sorry, Tim. Like, you cannot. You would
Don't
never,
question my
ever
integrity, mate.
you would never do it. And
Yeah.
yet, you know, in the pub, I would. You know, if I had a few drinks with Davy Coote and I was going around someone's house for afters, I might, you know, say it. So, you know, just that element of it, just it rubs me out the wrong way. And it just, you know, because you know it's there. You know he can be verbose and all that. And he decides he doesn't want to do it. You. Sorry, Tim. That's a lot today. I'm going on holiday, so I've checked out. So anyway, just annoys me.
Yeah.
Right. Let's do some heroes and villains of the last few days. Give us a hero, Danny. What you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Ruud van Nistelrooy. I know there's a lot of people out there that'll take a shot at me for this, but 4 wins and a draw. That draw was the 1-1 result against Chelsea. 11 goals scored, just 3 conceded. He did the obvious thing. He put Casemiro alongside Ugarte or Ujarte, depending on how you want to say it. Whatever that was happening in terms of the structure of the tactical setup for Erik ten Hag, simplified it, and all of a sudden Bruno gets what, like 4 goals and 2 assists over 4 matches. Um, what? How do I say this correctly? Whatever he did, he simplified the equation for the group of players to at least find the joy, like recreated the mentality of the club, and ultimately sets this group up for Ruben Amorim to come in a completely different environment than what he would have come in 10 days ago. This team would have been shattered and battered and bruised and had a low confidence based on some of the results and the way the momentum was going against them. Ruud van Nistelrooy looking sharp on that sideline. Listen, he's a club legend. I know he was a part of the coaching staff, but he always felt like he was pushing back for Ten Hag in some of those crucial moments. At least you can see kind of like the body language. He took the group, he got the results, and I think he found a little bit of flair for the team to kind of build itself back into. Confirmation that he's walking away as of the recording of the show, that Ruben Amorim is going to keep his team, that Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to be one of a few that are going to see the end of their time. You can kind of tell following the game against Leicester City when he walked up and he basically did his lap of honor, stopped in front of Stratford End and kind of basically did the clap and did the whole like this to you. And by the way, by the way, not for nothing, I think that 4-game window puts him in a completely different area in terms of what clubs are looking for in a manager and say, well, dude, hold on a second. Look what he did in 4 games, got 11 goals out of them, conceded just 3. That's a pretty big bounce back. So, yeah, hats off to the man. Little tip of the cap, because I think he did his job. He did it with authority. He did it with a passion and a flair for the love of the club. And and in no way, shape, or form did he pull a Lampard and maybe tarnish anything that looks like what Ruud van Nistelrooy means to Man United and what Man United means to Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Never do a Lampard, never do a Coote. Everyone knows that. Those are rules for life, rules to live by. Yeah, I think you're right. I think he's put himself in a good position. He's handled it as well as anyone possibly could. The way it's played out, you do sort of get the sense he did think he'd be there for the season, then maybe be in contention for the job after that. So, yeah, I think he'll be in a job sooner rather than later. For me, I have a couple of choices for hero. I was going to do Ipswich Town, but that kit is so abominable that I feel like I can't praise them. A semi Ed Sheeran designed kit, and I'm all for a pink kit. The Miami one is great. The Palermo one is great. I'm all for it. But a poor design with a weird, like child-drawn cityscape across the top. Plus, his music is diabolical, so I couldn't let him have that. So I'm going for Brentford because I just, I if you haven't seen it yet, the best goal of the weekend for me, and there's been some great goals, was Johan Wissa's winner against Bournemouth. It just was a team absolutely purring at the peak of their powers. They are statistically the best team at home in the Premier League this season, better than all the big names you could come up with. And this game, where they're losing against Bournemouth at one point, they get it back to 2-2. And Vitaly Yarnell, who is a bit of a lug nut in central midfield, he's got Semenyo behind him. Ball's played into his feet on the sideline. He lets it go through his legs and Semenyo's legs and runs around him. That's already supreme confidence. He then chops inside and plays a defense-splitting pass into Johan Wissa, who is one of those sort of unfancied players that scores against everybody. And he takes it and he chips the keeper and he pops it in. It is just so good and so enjoyable. And it's a team that believe in themselves, their manager, the setup, they're well coached, but they do a bit more than what they're coached because they're feeling themselves. All of it. It's fantastic. Another game where you've seen 5 goals at the GTEC. Love to watch them. Love the story of it. There's not a single player, maybe Mbumo, who you think, if they went down, for example, they'd come straight back up. The rest, you'd be like, take it or leave it. They're a lower mid-table squad, but they're playing better than anybody at home, and it's fantastic, and I love it. So Brentford, because I would have done Ipswich, but God, that kid. Give us a villain.
I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Union firing Jim Curtin. Unceremoniously, huge surprise to a lot of us on the outside looking in, because if there was ever a time in which a manager deserved kind of a bogey season, it would have been Jim Curtin based on what he's done over the tenure of his career at Philadelphia Union. Jay Sugarman and the owner, Ernst Tanner, and the general manager, effectively the owner, Jay Sugarman, saying that Ernst Tanner believed that for us as an organization to take that next step, we have to have a new manager. Ernst Tanner coming out and basically talking about in the start of the season, there were this structure that had to be met for Jim Curtin to operate in. There's a weird power dynamic that happens. And I'm always intrigued by this because the owner hires the sporting director or the general manager to build the roster for the manager to either have success or to save himself from. Because, every coach has a certain idea of how he wants to manage the group of players. But the problem is for the sporting directors and the general managers historically in this club or in this league, you sometimes forget that while you think you have your hand on the pulse of what's happening, it's up to the coach and his coaching staff to manage the personalities within that group and then recognize the strengths and weaknesses to then build a formation to get the best out of the group. The one thing that Jim Curtin has overcome year after year is the selling of usually some of their best players while then trying to bring in that next crop of young player. And he's done an amazing job over the years. Side note, Philadelphia Union 2 is in a great run in MLS Next Pro and has 4 or 5 young kids that are going to make their way into the first team. But it can't always be about budgeting for the present and for the future. And for Jim Curtin, I can tell you that Max Bretos and I have had conversations around the league of how impressive Jim Curtin was, and should he ever become available, that he would be the type of manager that, clubs would drop all the interest in others to try to procure a contract with. So everybody's got their own risk. We never know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't understand the dynamics of the personal relationship. But for Jimmy Curtin, I think he's an extremely successful head coach in our league, and wouldn't be surprised to see him in a big job sooner rather than later. So I don't know if it's villainish, but disappointing nonetheless, because I certainly didn't see it coming.
It's quite funny. It was announced either live as we were on air, or it was like the night before, and we were just talking about it on one of the shows. Within seconds of us talking about Jim Curtin going, we had like 6 messages from different clubs saying, well, we'd have him.
Yeah.
We'd have him now, which I thought was quite interesting. He is going to go somewhere, and I'm sure it won't be too long if he doesn't want it to be. Mine, I feel like I do this every week now, but I'm doing Lopetegui again. Because I'll tell you what happened to me this weekend. So I was at my friend's son's christening, and I'm not a religious man, and I would happily publicly say I'm an atheist. So being in a Catholic cathedral at a christening was already quite a difficult thing for me to do. I couldn't do they said, oh, will you do like Godfather? And I was like, look, mate, to be honest with you, part of the script here says, do you reject Satan and accept Christ? And I don't. So like, I'll happily lie because it's a fairy story. It's fine. I'll do it. But like, if you actually believe this, I'm not going to do it because it feels unfair. So I didn't do it. But anyway, I'm sitting through this gibberish for like an hour. And then I came out and got my phone, and I was like, West Ham 0, Everton 0. And it was like half time. And I thought, I'd rather be here at this church suffering through this sermon than I would at West Ham against Everton, because like you could have predicted it before the game got underway. This team, the 2 great things about David Moyes, and again, David Moyes, it was time to go, right? I'd have him back now because it's now panic stations, but it was time to go. It had run its course, and he needed a break to go on the overlap and be reasonably funny, right? Fine.
He was pretty good. Yeah.
He was pretty good. He's got, like a lot of these guys, when they're not managers, they've actually had really interesting lives. And when they're managers, it's obviously extremely stressful for them, and so they're less fun, whatever. But like, the 2 great things about the David Moyes team was the counter-attack and, at their best, the solidity, the lack of risk, right? Those were the 2 good things. Didn't always work, and in the end, again, it was time to go, blah, blah, blah. So now you take that away, and of course, set pieces you could throw in there as well.
Yeah.
You take that away, and you take the set pieces away. Fine. What's Lopetegui brought instead? Nothing. Like nothing. To let James Ward-Prowse go, who played 50-odd games and scored like 8 goals and had 8 assists last season, and replace him with Carlos Soler, who's basically a handsome mist. Like it says this is a man who cannot assess a footballer or what they need in this league. They now don't score from corners. I mean, is he a pressing manager? I have not got a clue. Do they sit deep? Well, they don't. They have quite a high line. So they're high but don't press. Okay. Do they play through midfield? No, they don't pass the ball. They literally drew this weekend, having less possession than Sean Dyche's Everton. So, like, that's not possible. Like, they didn't have a shot to the 41st minute. Nothing. Like, he's brought Wan-Bissaka, who's a great defensive right back and seems to think he's an attacking player. It's the pace and power league, and he's got Guido Rodriguez, who seems to be running in treacle with iron boots.
I was waiting for Guido.
He just is not very good.
Did you see Tilo Kehrer scored this weekend?
Everyone's playing well, mate. Everybody's playing well. Like, just like all of them.
Just a little needle.
The whole Füllkrug thing.
Yeah.
Like, he's still injured. Like,
he was so good at Dortmund.
But like, was never a good fit. But at the very least, if he was fit, would they be better? I don't know. Because if you're bringing him in to press, you brought the wrong guy.
Did you know, by the way, Mikel Antonio is left to go join up with Jamaica?
Good. You know what? Good. You know what? Mikel Antonio doesn't owe us anything. I hope he plays as many games for Jamaica as he bloody likes. Because that guy is still being asked to do something he should not be asked to do. And he can't score goals in this league. There was a point where I think it was Bowen running down the left wing, and he looked up and no one's in there because Antonio is old as sorry, Tim. The midfield are slow as sorry, Tim. And the only person who doesn't seem to notice it is Julen Lopetegui.
I've only had 2 cursies this whole show. I'm just saying. I've been really good today.
Yes, that's true. Sorry, Tim. But like, I can't think of one positive from having Lopetegui in charge for a quarter of this season. Not one. No player has excelled. No performance stands out. No goal was particularly memorable. I couldn't tell you his style or what he's trying to do. I am genuinely stunned by how bad he is. And a must-win game against a crap team, he didn't have a shot to the 41st minute and didn't win. And the next run of games is Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, and then the Christmas run. And I just don't think he deserves the Christmas run. He's been in charge for 6 months and everything has got worse. And look at Hertzler, who's been there for no time. Arne Slot, been there for no time. Look at Ruud van Nistelrooy. He was there for 2 weeks and he did something. Lopetegui has done nothing. If we had no manager, it'd be better than what is currently happening with Lopetegui, who should be fired by the time he reconvene. But he won't be. But there you go.
Hey, by the way, before we go, I just want you to know, because of this David Coote situation, Liverpool fans are tweeting, all right, lads, I need a thread of every major decision that Coote has officiated over during every Liverpool game, where he's been the referee, the fourth official, or VAR. You've just opened yourself up. You've just completely opened yourself up for this.
And this is why there's no comeback. There just can't be a comeback for this. He might have to do, what was it? The other Madley went to like Belgium or something, didn't he? It'd be something like that now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Was it Bobby
You'll get him. You're going to get him.
Potentially.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No one knows who Liverpool are in America, right? Be fine.
No. That's not a soul.
It's going to be fine. Anyway, that is the Week in the Tackle podcast. We're back at some point next week. It'll be a bit later because Dunny's away with the US men. I've no idea who they're playing. I'm not going to look into it, but we'll find out next time we're together. Is that all right?
Yeah. Playing at the office. I was doing my Steve McLaren.
That's fine. That's okay then. We've got it out. That was a Steve McLaren impression. That's Brian Dunseth, by the way, did that. Don't fire me. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program.
Okay, David Coote.
We'll see you at some point round David Coote's house next week.